So I just want to say briefly, I sort of feel about this resolution how a couple of council members said they felt about a resolution that myself and Rogers had a few weeks ago that is not necessarily worth the paper that it's printed on. The issues that, the reason these meetings go long is not because of clapping. It's by far the smallest thing that we have to deal with. This is not an issue whatsoever. This is a solution to search for problem. So when we the meeting that was discussed before, with all this sort of, I think prompted all of this, when there were folks, and I don't, maybe they were paid, maybe they were not, who knows. But when there were a lot of folks in the audience, the way it started was actually very much like many other meetings that we've had, and absolutely not different at all. People clapped at the end, gave applause at the end of hearing other public speakers talk, which is very normal. Nothing got to a heightened sense of tension until members of the dais started speaking about how the public should react. But the public had not done anything up to that point that deserved them being admonished. The public acted the way the public always acts. People made their statements and the audience clapped. And that's what happens on a regular basis and had happened on a regular basis up until that point. It wasn't until members of the audience forced the issue of whether we should applaud, and multiple times, members of the dais forced that issue multiple times that you saw a negative reaction from the public. I also want to, and I hardly ever quote Don Gosney, but I read his email, and he specifically pointed out that he did the math. I didn't get a chance to do the math. That if you watch that meeting, it was about 18 seconds worth of applause, give or take, after the speakers. And my guess is there's a certain amount of time that it takes for the members of the public to get to the podium in the first place. So that is probably covered within there. But even if you say that there's an additional 18 seconds, there were 29 speakers. If you do the math, 29 times 18 seconds, 500 some, and then you divide it by 60 for 60 seconds in a minute. Okay. So you're basically talking about 8 additional minutes on top of 29 speakers. So we would have been done in 37 minutes. But because the dais wanted to force the issue, we ended up spending, about an hour dealing with it. So this is not the issue. The issue that these meetings run long has more to do with things that go up here on the dais. That's why Councilmember Rogers and I had another item that we didn't get to. We didn't get to finish, and that's on the agenda again tonight, and we won't get to again to deal with how we behave on the dais. But this is certainly not the problem. Applause is not the problem. Another real quick thing in terms of other cities, I know it's the cities that are listed in the agenda report. You've got Los Angeles, which is the second biggest city in the country. You've got a number of counties. The only other city that's comparable to Richmond is Sunnyvale. And I know it was stated that somehow this is a Richmond-only thing where you applaud. I actually, for my day job, I've actually sat in on council meetings up and down the I-80 corridor, up and down the East Bay. And when they have controversial issues, people applaud and do the same things they do here. The difference with the other cities in our area is that they don't have controversial issues on a regular basis. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing that we take on things like the minimum wage and things like the Richmond Cares program. I support those things, but let's just be honest. When you take on things that are controversial on a regular basis, you're going to have a more active and you're going to have a more active public that is going to behave differently. So that's the difference. I'm looking at the El Cerrito City Council agenda right here. The most controversial thing on here is whether or not, and this is for their meeting today, is what is the Planning Commission action regarding the design review of a wireless telecommunication facility, and this is not a wireless tower, but just a facility on a utility pole that already exists. So that's the most controversial thing that they're dealing with today. So it's not surprising that they're not going to have audiences that are as active and as animated as ours are on a regular basis. So I will be voting against this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next